joining me on my soapbox today. My name is Mindy Preffling, and I am the Client Services Senior Manager for Spencer Ogden, a global energy and infrastructure recruitment agency. We provide leading recruitment services to our clients and candidates, creating careers to power a sustainable future. My guest today is Steve Doyon, CEO of Onward Energy. As CEO, Steve leads a strong team of professionals within the energy industry as they work hard to innovate and create change in the sector. On today's episode, we'll be discussing the importance of adapting during a time of great change, in this case, the joining of two companies. I'll be getting Steve's perspective on how to maintain a strong, people-centered culture during a merger, and how to ensure your team stays united despite the challenges. We'll also be discussing the progress that the renewable energy industry has made with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the past few years, and how the sector as a whole is starting to attract more diverse candidates. All right, well, Steve, thank you so much for joining me on my soapbox today. I'm really excited to have you here.
Great, I'm happy to be here.
So I thought it would be valuable for us to start with an introduction to Onward Energy and your history with the company.
Sure. So Onward is a US-focused IPP in that sort of classic sense, primarily focused on generating assets. And we have an operating portfolio of 43 projects, covers 16 states, and comprises approximately 4.2 gigawatts. And we have, I'd say we have two attributes that I think makes us somewhat unique in the industry. Number one is that we cover both gas thermal and renewable assets, with the renewables split roughly 50-50 between utility scale wind and solar. And the second attribute is that we're owned by an open-ended infrastructure fund. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but with respect to our technology coverage, it's sort of a nice segue into our history. So we became Onward in January of last year, January of 2021. And following a merger of two IPPs, one of those was Novatus Energy, and the other one was Southwest Generation. And Novatus was a renewable energy company that I started in late 2015 with the Infrastructure Investment Fund, which is our owners. And it was purely focused on utility scale wind and solar. Whereas Southwest Gen, which was also owned by the same fund, was a gas thermal focused IPP. And in 2020, our favorite COVID year, we decided to work to merge the two companies, as we felt that there was a need for a more comprehensive IPP that could address both decarbonization as well as reliability. And in fact, it's really part of our core strategy, that sort of combination. So on the second point about our ownership, the Infrastructure Investment Fund, or IIF, it's managed by JP Morgan. It's at this point, it changes quite frequently, so I might have the number wrong, but it's about a $30 billion fund. There are approximately 20 platforms, all focused on OECD countries, and they range. They're really core infrastructure. But the primary investor class are pension funds with a long-term perspective. And while there's a growing number of open-ended infrastructure funds operating in the industry, IIF was really one of the pioneers in that arena, and particularly as it applies to generation investments. And what that means for us is it's a long-term life of asset ownership perspective. So, we're generally buy and hold. And this allows us to operate and manage the assets from a long-term perspective, which really pervades our entire philosophy. And importantly, our stakeholder relationships with our communities, with our customers, with our regulators, and with our employees. We have a very long-term focus. So, yeah, that's the overview.
Thank you. Thank you for that background. So with the merger with Southwest Gen, I imagine some of the goals have changed for you as the CEO. So what are some of your goals for Onward Energy?
Yeah, so our primary vision revolves around being a leader in the energy transition. And for us, our sort of mission is providing long-term sustainable returns to our investors and renewable and reliable energy to our customers at an affordable price. And when we put the two companies together, I mean, I think the previous platforms had sort of similar visions about being part of the energy transition, but in a very separate way. For us, it was, at Novatus, we were very focused on renewables, and we didn't worry so much about the intermittency of renewables and how that was going to be an issue in that energy transition. But as in recent years, we became increasingly concerned about that. Whereas at Southwest Generation, they were primarily focused on gas thermal and on a lot of peaking capacity, and starting to get into batteries. But their core competence, if you will, was reliability. And the more we talked, and John Foster was the CEO there, the more John and I talked, the more we thought, hey, putting these two companies gives us significant scale that we wouldn't otherwise have. And it gives us competencies that better enable us to navigate this energy transition. So, but to answer your question more specifically, our near-term goal is to really double the size of the company in the next 4 years. So for us, that means getting to 8 or 9 gigawatts. And we're in the process of closing on a few additional acquisitions right now. So by the end of this year, we are going to be at 6.2 gigawatts with 55 projects across 22 states. And again, keeping that split between sort of gas thermal, about 50-50 gas thermal and renewables, and all utility scale. And we want to use the scale that we have in an appropriate fashion. We really want to get a bigger seat at the table as we navigate all of the changes in the generation industry that we're going to face in the coming decades. So changes in generation makeup, changes in the way we operate the grid, changes in the way we use power in the U.S. And having spent 35 years in this industry, I really haven't seen this pace of change in my entire career. And it's really important for us to be ready to for that change, to really embrace it for opportunities and to help shape it. And so, as I said, our longer term goals are to grow and to double in size. But we want to do that in a way that is responsive to our customers and responsive to the transition, and in a way where we can help shape what that energy transition is going to look like.
Great. That's actually, it sounds like you've grown pretty significantly even in this last year, because you said you were at 4.2 gigawatts when you merged Novatus and Southwest Gen, and now you're at 6.2 gigawatts, or will be at the end of the year?
6.2 by the end of this year, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is pretty significant growth. It's exciting to grow this way, but I think, I'm sure other people would agree, once you get to a certain scale, the growth does start to accelerate because you have a larger platform. It's actually harder to, once you have a larger platform, when you're looking at transactions, you have to do things that are going to be material to your growth. And so you start looking at larger and larger things. And so that growth kind of accelerates.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are some of the challenges that you foresee the rest of this year and into next year with those growth plans?
So I think our number one challenge at the moment, and it's probably similar to many organizations out there, is growing our organization in an efficient manner. I mean, we have roughly 170 employees now. We expect to be at over 200 by year end. And then we're going to be continuing to hire in 2023 as we continue our growth journey. And we really started the ramp up last year. And the mantra at that time was, we want to start hiring ahead of the growth that we expect. And what we're finding now is that that growth is coming at such a rapid pace that, we are just keeping up with the growth. And really one of our core strategies is to be very proactive. In the past, I think, and when you're sort of evenly staffed, you can react to all of the operating assets that you have and operate those, but you tend to be in a very reactive mode. And it's only when you have additional bandwidth that you can start getting very proactive and have that bandwidth to really think, forward looking. And so I think one of our challenges, our primary challenges, is finding the right people as we grow. And like many companies, we found that location flexibility is, particularly important to our prospective new hires. We operate out of 3 primary corporate offices, one here where I'm at in New York City. We have an office in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we have an office in Denver. But we have been very flexible about remote working, depending on the particular position. But I think that sort of segues into the other challenges that we have, which is to make sure that we really have strong cultural alignment across our entire organization, where we have 3 primary offices. At the end of the year, by the end of the year, we'll have 55 operating sites. We'll be in 22 states. So, we have thought and put a lot more effort into really making sure that we grow in the right way and we maintain the type of culture we want. We want that strong cultural alignment across the entire organization. And one of the things that I think was maybe a little bit of an aha moment was when we say we want that cultural alignment, that doesn't mean that each of our locations has an identical culture. We recognize and welcome sort of diversity of thought, and that often exhibits itself in, a slightly different vibe, if you will, in our offices and plant locations. But it's important for us that even with that sort of diversity, that there is a sort of a common foundation of values throughout the organization. And for us, that's one that our foundational value, it's one built on the concept of people first. And if you go to our website, you'll see that term, people first. And it's really important for us. It's how our interactions, how we want them to be. We want them to be guided by integrity and respect. And you'll also see on there that we have 4, primary common values: accountability, adaptability, collaboration, and excellence. And as we continue to grow, and especially as we evolve into working more remotely in the sort of hybrid working, we need to just make sure that we maintain those foundational values. And I think one thing we found is that that has to be pervasive throughout the organization. We have to make sure that we're doing things in that manner. And another thing that we think is really important is face-to-face interaction. And it's funny that that 3 years ago, we never talked about, wow, we really need face-to-face interaction. I mean, we were always face-to-face for the most part, but the world has really changed. Not only because of COVID, but really, with the merger, we had 3, primary offices, and we weren't necessarily going to consolidate into one office. So for us, what we're trying to do is, while people may be in different offices or maybe even remote, we're encouraging people to travel to our different locations, to work for a week at another office, or meet the people that you interact with normally remotely, or to go to one of the plants, get to know the staff, get to know what we do in operations. And so we really encourage that and try to facilitate it. We try to make it as easy as possible for people. And we're going to see that more and more. Another thing that we're doing this year is, for the first time, we're going to have a all company assembly in Colorado later this summer, where we're just going to try to get everybody together for a few days of really just fun and interaction. And I think it's really important to us to really kind of maintain that culture. So again, lots of sort of business challenges, but growing in the right manner and finding the right people, number one challenge, and then making sure that we're providing an environment that has consistency across that organization and really working on that cultural aspect.
Thank you for that. You know, I actually wasn't aware of Onward's values, but they're almost the exact same as Spencer Ogden's values. Ours are people, accountability, collaboration, and excellence. So I think the only one that we're missing is adaptability. Was that one?
Adaptability, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that one too.
Adaptability is one that I've been talking to the team a lot more about lately, because you know, we're in an environment now where everybody's heard the term VUCA, and it used to be that you would sort of plan for things happening at some point. And I think we're in an environment now where change is constant, and the pace of that change is just incredible. And so, and rather than we're trying to develop an organization that that is a change-oriented organization that can really adapt to all of those changes, and not sort of approach it as, oh, it's sort of like, wow, we're through that big issue, you know, now we can get back to steady state. Instead, we really want, and why it's part of our core value, is we want people to know that there is going to be a lot of change, but you know, if we can be adaptable to that, you know, then I think we can be a really effective organization.
Yeah, you know what I particularly like about your answer, because if we go back to my question, I said, what are the challenges with your growth plans for Onward? And most people start with, and this is rightfully so, with the talent challenge, finding good people, which is you know, it is a subtext to what you've talked about, but really what you talked more about is how do you create an environment, a culture, and a company where people are attracted to work and want to stay. And I think you're really getting at the root of what really people should be thinking about when we're talking about the talent challenge of what are we doing to create a space where people want to come to work every day.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You really want, I mean, people have a lot of options these days. You want, in terms of where they can work. And, you know, we want to be a place where we're a first choice.
So you touched on this next question because you mentioned you want to find the right people to create diversity of thought for Onward Energy. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. So for you, what does DE&I mean to you, and why is it an important topic?
So for me, DE&I is really just another way to characterize what I think are critical values for us, and really for any company out there, whether, you know, in the energy industry or not. I mentioned our foundational value of people first, and which starts to capture what I think is the core, you know, intention of DE&I. It's making sure that we interact in a manner that is inclusive and equitable, that we respect different points of view, and that, you know, we use that diversity of thought to accelerate our business. You know, making sure that we're representative of the communities in which we work, and really make sure we have provide a level playing field for everyone to succeed. And, you know, more and more, you know, the mantra of the last, you know, 4 or 5 years has all been around ESG. And, you know, when we think about that, of which DE&I is a critical component, but the way we think about it now is that ESG and DEI is incorporated in our business in a way that we don't have to talk about it like it's a separate thing. And it's just how we do business and how we interact. And I think the feeling is that if we make sure that it is really the way we do business, that it will, you know, it will have the longevity and shape the culture in the way that we want it to be. And then you're not having to really think about it, like I said, as a separate thing, because you're not doing those things. So for us, it's really important for us to be successful by incorporating it into our business.
Yeah, it's embedded. It's not something that you have to artificially kind of come down on people like, hey, we need to be conscious of this. Like it's already woven into the culture.
Right.
So what is or what have you done to create that culture at Onward? Do you have like a programmatic approach or how did you do that?
So, the culture, and first of all, I'll also say and be honest that it's, and I think it's always the case, but culture is sort of always a work in progress, right? We're always, first of all, it's always slightly changing. And for us, as I said earlier, it is important that we allow for diversity in our different offices. And so for us, it's focusing on the core things that we want to make sure are consistent around the entire company. So in terms of promoting DE&I, as I said, the first thing is it embedded in our culture? And I think it is. We have the right values, and we try to articulate those values, the way we behave, in a way that focuses on the equitability, the inclusiveness, integrity, respect. Those are all, if you talk to people within the company about the words that, when they think about values, those are the words that that I think that they'll come up with. I hope they'll come up with. But secondly, it's making sure that we live by those values, that we need to make sure we don't tolerate behaviors that are counter to those values, and that we reinforce those behaviors that are aligned. I would say the third thing we do at Onward to promote DE&I is to make sure that we have the right policies in place. And that includes things like annual training. For example, we do unconscious bias training, and we do that on an annual basis. But it's making sure that those policies provide that alignment. And then finally, as I mentioned before, as I did mention before, one of the things that, as an industry, we struggle with the diversity element of DE&I. And while it's getting better, I still think that is something, long term that the industry has been dealing with, because when I think about, the folks that are at the senior executive level in our industry today, it's people that have been in the industry 20 to 30 years. And the people 20 to 30 years ago that were attracted to our industry, predominantly, were older white males like me. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important at Onward that we have to do our part to support bringing new people into the industry, people that have previously been underrepresented in our industry. So we try to do that through scholarships and internships. And we had an internship program prior to COVID that was focused exclusively on women and minorities. And we put that on hold during COVID, and we're just cranking it back up again. But we partnered with a few universities, and the idea was to try to bring, do our part to bring people into the industry that, we felt were very underrepresented, because there were, a lot of times, as you and I have talked in the past, we are out there recruiting, and we want to make sure we have a diverse slate of candidates. But sometimes it's hard because, especially when we're looking at, the more mid to senior level positions, there isn't that candidate pool out there, or it's a very smaller pool. And we want to make sure, we're going to be in this business for the next 30, 40, 50 years. We want to make sure that over time, that we can get that right candidate pool, so that our employees and our diversity looks like our communities.
Great. I've been working in recruitment for a long time, and obviously, as being a podcast host now, I talk to people frequently about DE&I, what they're doing, or what can they do. So I appreciate that. It sounds like Onward has made a really conscious effort to make this part of your culture, but I also think that people follow what their leadership behaviors. So if this is something that you genuinely believe in, then the people that report into you will also genuinely believe in it, because they're going to do kind of whatever their leadership shows them. They lead by example, right? And I don't know if I'm articulating this the way that I really want to. I mean, I think this happens in all ways. Like, you find that certain teams kind of have microcosms at companies. The way that the manager operates, the rest of the team will operate. If people respond in a timely manner, usually it's because the manager responds in a timely manner. And the reverse is true as well. So in working with you, it's clear that this is something that you genuinely care about and want to promote. So that has a trickle down effect on your organization.
It does. I mean, it's important to me, and even more importantly, it's important to our investors. And our investors at the fund, we always talk about these issues, and I would say we give equal, if not more, time to these sort of more qualitative issues about the types of companies that we are growing. Mm. As opposed to the detailed quantitative aspects of our economic metrics, if you will. Mm-hmm. It is, and I think they want to demonstrate to us that, listen, these things are important to us. We want to make sure that they're important to you. We want to make sure that they're incorporated into your business. And this idea of incorporating ESG in particular throughout our business is really being driven by our investors. This is what they want to see. So and we're totally on board with it.
So you had mentioned before that you feel like as an industry, we're struggling on the DE&I front. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I mean, you gave a little bit of color there, but tell me why you think we're struggling.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think it's in large part, when I think about the history of our industry, when I started in the industry 35 years ago, we were at the very, very beginnings of the independent power industry. And for the most part, anybody that wanted to go into power generation really went to work for one of the utilities. And the utilities were by and large hiring engineers. And it was, primarily white males. And those are the folks that were coming out of the engineering schools. And those are the folks that were working throughout the organizations. And then as the IPP industry began, we were recruiting people that had, a lot of whom had started their careers in the utilities. And so, and as all of those folks have advanced in their careers, here we are, 35 years later, and a lot of the senior executives at these industries look like that cohort, if you will, from back then. And I think as time has gone on since then, I think people have come to realize that diversity is really important for a whole variety of reasons. There's the whole, we talk about DE&I, there's the whole equity and inclusiveness aspect, which I think you've seen in the way companies have modified their values over time and focused more on being more equitable, being more inclusive. But the diversity element has been slower. I think that's lagged because that has to sort of start with where you recruit. And I do think it's changing. I think we've done a really good job of, I think, attracting and promoting more women in the industry. We still need to do more, and especially at the CEO level. So I've seen significant improvement there. I think we've been behind on attracting and promoting minorities, but I do think that's changing, and especially now that we're in an industry that is very focused on decarbonization and sustainability, that is attracting people from very diverse backgrounds that normally wouldn't have been attracted to our industry. And so I think we have more to offer. And so I'm hoping these next cohorts of young leaders that we're seeing now are going to be, by definition, it's going to be a more diverse group of people.
Yeah, like there's only so many women and minorities that exist in the industry today. So where we really need to put attention is how do we attract new generations of talent to become interested that are more diverse than what we have seen in the past.
Exactly. I mean, for us, specifically, moving away from the industry, for us as a company, I mean, I think we're doing a pretty good job. We're doing all the right things with respect to establishing, what's important to us from a value perspective. We're making sure that we collectively hold people accountable to those values, and I think we've done a lot to really to level out that playing field, if you will. So, 3 of my 6 direct reports are women, and so at the leadership level, we have very strong role models for women, and I think role models are really important as a way to attract. You mentioned, how do you attract women and minorities or underrepresented groups? In large part, it's by making sure you have good role models, and that they see, okay, that person's done really well, they've moved up, I can be like them. And so that's been really important, and we do have that. Two of my 4 independent board directors are women, so we even have that at the board level. But I think we need to do more to attract minorities to our company, and that's something we're trying to improve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this question doesn't have to be DE&I related, but it can be. I'd like to know something that you're particularly proud about. And I think that there's probably a lot of ways you can answer that question, but I think just with what you're doing at Onward Energy specifically.
Yeah, so I think in part it relates to the DEI, but I'm just, I could say a lot about, wow, I'm really proud of our growth and all these projects that we've done and what we've done in the industry, but probably most of all, I'm just immensely proud of the team we've built. It's our people, our plant staff, our corporate staff. We got through a merger during COVID, which wasn't easy. Our folks have worked hard through this process, and I think we've come out of it stronger than ever. We have a can-do type of organization. It's a fix it, not blame it perspective. And we're going through significant change, lots greater scale, more people, more processes, and our folks are really thriving on that change. We've consistently delivered strong economic results to our investors, but at the same time, we've delivered stellar safety metrics. We've focused on our communities. We provide scholarships. That's one of our primary ways we interact with our communities, is we provide scholarships. But at the beginning of COVID, for example, we found that there were a lot of the communities that were shutting down their schools, and kids were having to work from home. And we sort of take it for granted that everybody has a computer to be able to work from home, and that there's plenty of computers around. A lot of these families didn't have an extra computer lying around for their kid to go to school with. So in some of our communities, we bought laptops for all the kids, and so again, that's just one element of that, the whole foundational value of being, having a people first perspective, and I think that's probably what I'm most proud of.
That's great. So you've been in the industry for 35 years. What would you recommend to somebody who's considering coming into the industry?
So first of all, I would say that I think the industry will be very welcoming to any potential recruit. Where everybody is looking for new hires up and down the level, or up and down the chain in the organizations. But I would say, listen, keep an open mind. One of the things I find with many young folks, and I have a daughter who's 26, so I consider her part of that cohort. And a lot of what I get is from things that I talk to my daughter and her friends about. But one of the things I think is great about the young people coming out of school is that they have a really strong vision about sustainability, about decarbonization. They're really passionate about this. But one of the things that I think that I try to provide is a little bit of perspective about practicality. And, our approach at Onward recognizes that for decarbonization to be successful, we can't compromise reliability. And when we combined the two companies, I actually had a few of the younger folks on the Novatus side come to me with a little bit of angst about the fact that they work for a company now that owns some gas plants. These are fossil fuels. But I think once they understand that our strategy is to accelerate decarbonization, but to do it in a responsible manner, I think they have a different perspective. The other thing I would say, and this is maybe more of a general recommendation for new folks coming into the industry, is keeping an open mind about what they ultimately want to do. There's many paths for advancement within our industry. And one of the things that I've learned is that those people that have been most successful are people that have worn many different hats and have a broad perspective. And so you may find yourself, working in one area and have an opportunity, especially at a company like Onward, to move into another area and learn something new. Take that opportunity, learn new things. Don't necessarily get stuck in a silo. It's really going to help you later in your career to have that broad perspective. And then the last thing I would say is, and this is one my daughter I know would laugh at me about, but I would say, while remote working is great for flexibility, it isn't so good for establishing relationships and for learning. So don't underestimate the value of face-to-face interaction. It really is important.
That's great. Thank you. So as an extension to that, and you've given us a lot of insight into the culture at Onward Energy, but in closing up our episode, I always ask my guests the what's in it for me. So why should someone consider working for Onward specifically?
So a couple of things. I would say that, we're a company that has broad industry participation and a growing company. So we're not going to be sort of stagnant. The company that you come to work for today, a year from now, is going to look different. It's going to have the same consistent values, but it's going to be bigger. It's going to have more reach. It's going to be doing new and interesting things. And so if you like that challenge of having a lot of change, dealing with that change, and having opportunity to learn new things, then we can offer you a great place here. The other thing is that we have a long-term perspective, sort of consistent with our ownership. So a career at Onward is really a real career. You could be with us for your entire career. You could, change job functions, but be within the same company. And it's an opportunity to learn and grow within the industry. Because we're going to own these assets long-term, because we're not owned by a 10-year closed-end fund or short-term capital where, you may be sold in a couple of years. You may have different owners. Your perspective, your vision may change. Your strategy may change. Ours is going to be a lot more consistent. We're going to be a place that is available to people for an entire career. And as I said, if you're looking for a place where our fundamental value is on people first, and you're looking for a place where you can feel empowered, I think we can provide a home for you. One of the things that we like to try to do is push down responsibility and give people an opportunity to contribute at all levels within the company. Now, what goes with that is accountability as well. But you can be fairly quickly wherever you're at within the company, contributing in a really meaningful way. And I think that's important. I think that, when I think about the number one thing that we try to tell people is there's lots of places where you can make money. There's lots of places where you can get similar compensation, if you will. But there's only a limited number of places where you can feel like you really have a purpose. And we try to, we try to focus on that we want people to have a strong purpose. We want you to come to work because you really believe in what you're doing. And that's really important. And those are the type of people that we want.
Great. So you have purpose, stability, and diversity in all its different forms on offer.
Yes.
And you.
Great.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
No, it's been great, Mindy. I hope maybe a few people will see this and decide to give us a ring. But we always have a lot of open positions, and certainly Spencer has been very helpful for us in finding those candidates. But we really do want people that that sort of have our similar vision in this energy transition. And it's an exciting place to work, and it's what drives me every day to come in. One of the things I tell people is that, and it's true with the investors that we have, which are primarily pension funds, we are providing sustainable returns to 60 million families across the world. And many of those families are working families. And that's, for me, that's what drives me every day when I come into work. I think about those 60 million families. I didn't work for a faceless corporation or faceless investors. We work for real people that count on us, and that's what drives me.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate it, Steve. This has been wonderful, and I think it will have a big impact on the folks that do take a listen.
Great, thanks, Mindy. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, you got it.